The Colorectal Cancer Alliance was built to support people who are going through colon cancer, who've already been diagnosed. And if you already have colon cancer, your mindset is very different than before you are diagnosed with colon cancer. Before I got colon cancer, I don't know, I would never think about wearing a shirt that says Colorectal Cancer Alliance. Cancer is sad, it's scary. Just recognizing kind of what my mindset was before my diagnosis, that's actually the audience that we need to reach. So we needed to kind of get away from those words so that we could have something that where people be willing to wear a t-shirt, wear a hat that's funny, that builds on the energy around the cause without asking people to be all the way there, saying, having something that says rectal on their t-shirt.
Have you ever noticed that some of the best ideas come from unexpected places? Your next breakthrough may come from a leader facing similar challenges, but in a completely different sector. Welcome to Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop. Join us as we explore how today's successful leaders inspire, influence, and connect with others. Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board, who have teamed up to spotlight how great leaders and communicators are making their impact in the world. This episode is brought to you by the George Washington University's College of Professional Studies. With in-person and online programs ranging from master's degrees in public relations strategy to certificate programs in digital communications, GW offers more than just the credentials to help working professionals get ahead. It prepares them to be leaders in their field. As a proud GW graduate myself, I can attest that faculty members combine academic rigor with real-world lessons that can't always be found in textbooks. Check out cps.gwu.edu for more information. I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, who's a recommendation from one of our listeners. When I first heard this person's story, it was clear to me that she is a chief influencer. Brooks Bell is a technology entrepreneur turned patient advocate. After being diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer at age 38, Brooks was inspired to educate the public about young onset colon cancer and elevate the conversation about colonoscopies. She created Lead From Behind to rebrand and destigmatize colonoscopies through celebrity awareness campaigns. Now powered by the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, Lead From Behind's work has gotten thousands of people to get colonoscopies, which of course helps to prevent colon cancer and helps to detect early onset colon cancer. Brooks founded her eponymous company, Brooks Bell Inc., a digital insights consultancy that has generated over $2 billion for clients. I'm very inspired by how she took those lessons to this work with Lead From Behind. And her latest venture is Worldclass Clothing, a new luxury apparel brand to make colonoscopies more fun, sexy, and on trend. Proceeds will help pay for colonoscopies for underinsured communities. We're going to talk a little bit more about that brand soon. Brooks, you have been called many things, from technology leader to cancer survivor. Today, we are thrilled to call you Chief Influencer. Welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, I have to say, I always love it when we get recommendations from listeners. And as soon as I read like a few sentences about you, I was really thrilled and excited, and I was happy that you agreed to join us because, first of all, your story as a young cancer survivor resonated with me because I was also diagnosed with cancer at a young age, and I've been very fortunate, as you have, to get through that. But it's definitely an experience that changes you. And in your case, this experience inspired you to take action and launch a campaign. So I wondered, can you tell us about your journey to create Lead From Behind?
Yeah, absolutely. So after I was diagnosed, really the day after my diagnosis for colon cancer, I stepped down from running my company as CEO and asked my president to step in and take over. And I did that because I thought I would no longer be a good CEO to my company. It wasn't the CEO that my company needed. And also I needed to focus on my health and get through this big challenge. As I was going through my treatment with colon cancer, because of my background in data, I, of course, went into all the data around colon cancer to understand what is going on, how to, is this normal to get colon cancer at age 38, and what I could have done to prevent it. And it was really awe-inspiring, the kind of data that I saw. And I realized that colon cancer is a pretty special disease. It's unlike most other cancers. It's unlike a lot of diseases, and actually I saw there was a huge opportunity to educate people about it, because for me, I realized it is a much bigger disease than people realize, and it's actually totally preventable, which is also pretty uncommon within the cancer space. I felt like people needed to know that. And then my mind went to, how do I get people to know that? It's what's interesting about cancer, and then specifically colon cancer, is the stigma. It's with colon cancer, it's about your colon. A lot of people don't really even know what their colon is. It's your large intestine, but we don't use the word colon. We don't think about our large intestine as an organ that can get cancer in the first place. And then, of course, what goes through your large intestine is poop, and that's not something we like to acknowledge or think about or dwell on. And so it's just an ignored kind of part of our body. But yet, 1 in 24 people in the US will get colon cancer in their lifetime. It would be closer to 1 in 15 or 1 in 16 if we didn't actually have colonoscopies as a major screening modality for all Americans once they turn 45.
Wow. Do you know how many Americans actually get their colonoscopies when they turn 45? Because obviously you've done a lot to advocate for this, and I'm sure not everybody's doing it.
We just moved the screening age from 50 to 45 in 2021. So it's only a few years old. I think that the data might be around 30 or 40%. It's kind of new to have really good data on that. By the time they are in their 50s and 60s, it's closer to 60, 70, 80%, depending on whether or not you're well insured and what your income level is. So people are pretty good at getting colonoscopies eventually, but the problem is that the latest data that I saw was that the age that people get their first colonoscopy is usually around 54. So that is, several years after they have become qualified to get it covered. And there is a lot of cancer that happens between the age of 45 and 54.
Yeah. So unfortunately, lots of people are diagnosed with cancer, but only some of them try to raise money or launch a campaign, and very few succeed at breaking through the way that you have. How do you think it was that you were able to do that so effectively, Brooks?
Well, what happened is I decided that we needed to get a celebrity to get a colonoscopy. And the reason that seemed the right approach was that Katie Couric got a colonoscopy back in 2000, and it had a huge impact on culture. It was on the Today Show. And it was actually called the Couric effect, because she increased screening by 20% across the country for a period of time. And so I thought, well, it's now been, over 20 years since we had someone like Katie Couric do something so high profile, and it had a huge impact then, and it would have a huge impact now. And so it became a total focus of mine to think about, how do I get to a celebrity? Who should the celebrity be? How do I approach them? How do I pitch them? It was just sort of almost an obsession of like, how do I make this happen? And I thought, if I'm smart, I have a network, I can figure this out. If I focus on only this thing, even if it takes 10 years, I will get it done. It just had to focus and like figure out kind of the system of approaching celebrities. And so I decided to join the Colorectal Cancer Alliance as a board member, and then also to bring this sort of plan to them. I thought we need to develop a new brand that doesn't say colon in it, doesn't say rectal, doesn't say cancer in it, appeals to healthy people who aren't thinking about cancer, much less colon cancer yet. And we need to show that getting a colonoscopy is not sad or scary or fearful. It's something that healthy, smart, good-looking people do when they turn 45. And that's the only reason. They don't have to have a connection to cancer. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And so building a brand that is all about that. And then to find the right celebrity to send that message. So we basically decided to think about it as building a new brand and decided that we're going to hire an agency. As it happens, Ryan Reynolds owns an agency called Maximum Effort. They do his marketing, but they also do marketing for other brands as well. The thing about Maximum Effort is that you can't just hire them. They're not available for everyone to hire. They actually select you. You can pitch them on them working with you, but they will select you as a client. And so we decided to pitch them. We pitched them on the problem with colon cancer, how it affects everybody. Ryan Reynolds happened to be turning 45 at that time. And we just asked them to help us create and launch this brand. And that if Ryan wants to get involved, like that'd be great, but that really we're asking them to just create a brand for this cause. And amazingly, they said yes, and they were on board. So they actually created the name Lead From Behind with us. We got the logo and the website built with Maximum Effort. And then for the launch video, they approached Ryan about being involved, and he said yes. And he and Rob McElhenney, they both got their colonoscopies at their 45th birthdays and built a whole narrative around it. And sure enough, when it launched, it was a massive success. We had 16 million video views in the first week, and it was global news. And we saw a month later from ZocDoc's data that it had a 36% lift in colonoscopy appointments over the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Wow, that is so cool. Obviously, part of that story is that you saw that celebrities could make a big impact. They could really influence the public. But there's a piece of that I actually want to go back to even before that and ask you about. You joined the board of the Colorectal Cancer Alliance, and you, it sounds like, helped to influence folks inside that organization that have done so much work to build up their brand to say, we need another brand that doesn't mention any of the words in your brand that says something different. And I wonder if you could talk about, what that was like and that type of influence, because, there's the influence on the outside and there's the influence on the inside. And I think the inside piece is sort of one that I'd like to dig into.
Well, I think it's, knowing your audience. If the Colorectal Cancer Alliance was built to support people who are going through colon cancer, who've already been diagnosed. And if you already have colon cancer, your mindset is very different than you have before you are diagnosed with colon cancer. And so if you have been diagnosed, then your audience it has to be serious, because it's very serious, it's very scary. You have to be very sincere. Stigma is no longer really an issue because you're like in it already. So remembering, and so when I had colon cancer, of course, once I had it, like I was a very different person than I was before I got it. Before I got colon cancer, I don't know. I would never think about wearing a shirt that says Colorectal Cancer Alliance. I wouldn't have the word colon or rectal, rectal. It's just, there's just so much stigma around the word rectal or even cancer. Cancer is sad, it's scary. And so just recognizing kind of what my mindset was before my diagnosis, that's actually the audience that we need to reach. So we needed to kind of get away from those words so that we could have something that people be willing to wear a t-shirt, wear a hat that's funny, that builds on the energy around the cause without asking people to like be all the way there, having something that says rectal on their t-shirt.
Was it difficult to get folks inside the organization or other stakeholders on board with that, or were they like, oh yeah, no brainer, that makes a lot of sense? So, I mean, what was that like?
Yes and no. Yes, it was difficult. No, it was not difficult. I think they understood there's sort of like the inside the stadium and outside the stadium work. They needed to continue their existing work for people who had been diagnosed, and all the brand that they had already built. They understood that the reason it was not a bigger organization is because they did not appeal to people outside the stadium. It was a completely different, and also this was about prevention rather than supporting patients who had the disease. This was not about research,
Yeah.
which is what their work is. It wasn't about um, it wasn't about policy change or advocacy. It's just pure awareness and prevention, which isn't something that the organization was working on really at all.
Yeah.
So it was a new area. And so it justified a new brand.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting thing to think about because many organizations find themselves wondering, do I need a sub-brand? Do I need another brand for my campaign? Is that going to make sense for me? Or is it going to confuse folks and water down my core brand and my, the primary name that I've spent so much time and energy trying to develop in this noisy world? And so part of that, you talked about sort of the inside the stadium versus outside the stadium. But I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that, because of course, not only have you helped to launch Lead from Behind, but you founded an agency that has analyzed data and used data to sell things from sneakers to credit cards. And so I wonder if you could just share a little bit more insight about this challenge that other leaders might be grappling with right now about their brand, multiple brands, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. I think what my very first client that I worked with back in 2003, when I was 23 years old, was America Online. And they were growing, they were trying to get they were the main internet at that time.
Yeah,
It was when you were getting CD-ROMs in the mail that said 1,000 hours free, no credit card required.
remember
That's the
those.
AOL of that time when I was working with them. And and actually my role, I was this young freelancer, just starting Brooks Bell, and they were A/B testing all of their creative. It was basically all performance oriented. And you had to basically persuade people who might be, I don't know, a farmer in Nebraska to see that they should get online. And so I was trying to make creative that would persuade people to try America Online. And and I think and my background was actually in psychology. My major was in psychology and not creative, not design. And so I wasn't the best designer, but I was good at thinking about how to get into someone's brain. And I remember this moment when I was sitting in my like fancy office, big screen, broadband, connection, and with, a degree from a top school, and thinking about the person on the other side of the monitor, the person I was trying to talk to, who was probably looking at an 800 by 600 resolution on an old CRT monitor that was like that ugly beige, and on a super slow connection, who had never been online, probably didn't graduate from college, did not like a completely different person from me. And thinking about how does that person think, what do they care about, and how can I kind of connect with them. And so that is and that was the same kind of mental, and I would almost actually squint my eyes to think about this person and persuading them. I think that is still the principle of all the work that we did within my company to come up with the way to persuade people who are very different from you. And that is still the work that we're doing now with colon cancer and colonoscopies.
Hmm.
Like colonoscopies, I am totally on board with colonoscopies now. I know so much about colonoscopies and polyps and all the data. Like I have sort of, what is it? It's the curse of knowledge is I read as a principle a while ago. And once you know something, you can't unknow it. That's
Right.
the problem I have. And so how do I figure out how to persuade people who don't know anything and feel very differently about colonoscopies that I feel? They don't want it. They're afraid. They have a ton of stigma. They've never, I mean, they don't know what to expect. And they have a lot of like preconceived notions and a lot of cultural baggage around colonoscopies. How do I get in their brain, give them the right message and the right approach to get them over that? So to the degree that they actually call and make the appointment and actually follow through with it. I think it's a really fascinating challenge.
So celebrities have been one way that you have been able to do that. Anything else you can share about lessons you've learned in this particular case with colonoscopies, to sort of put yourself in that mindset for folks who may have cultural baggage or may just have a lack of information? to get them to take action? Because obviously this campaign's been very successful at getting folks to, the data shows at least reach out
Mhm.
to doctors.
Yeah. I think that we think about, some of the basic words we use with colonoscopies is like invasive. Invasive, not a helpful word. Does anyone ever want to have an invasive procedure? No. And also people assume that people are not going to want it. It's sort of like if we're assuming it's an assumption that we're never going to be able to communicate, convince somebody to get a colonoscopy. I think I try to set those aside and think about how do we frame it to be completely positive, and which it actually is fairly positive. Think about it as a spa day. A colonoscopy day, you're asleep for the procedure. It's actually the best nap you'll probably ever have. So thinking about it's a day off of work. When you're done, you get driven home, you get to hang out at home in your bed, like read some magazines, watch some daytime TV. Like it is a great day. So thinking about how awesome colonoscopy day is going to be is one way. Then think about the prep the day before. Think about that as a fast. We're doing fast for gut health already. We fasts are all the rage. So this is just a fast day. And the second is your prep. The prep is actually a cleanse. We should be cleaning out our guts occasionally anyway. It's actually a very easy peasy, like comfortable cleanse. It's not like diarrhea on the wall kind of violence. It is a very like soothing kind of like a trickle in the stream in the forest kind of cleanse. So just kind of educating people using humor and helping them think about colonoscopies in a completely different way. And then you wake up is with pretty much almost guaranteed good news. The first option, if you wake up, is that first outcome is that they will not find a polyp, and now you don't have to think about it for a whole decade. That's amazing not to have to think about this thing for a decade. Or they find a polyp and they snipped it out on the spot, which means that this was worth your time to get it done, and now you may have prevented cancer and the work is done. That is an amazing feeling. The third outcome, the worst outcome, is that they may have actually found cancer, which they did in my case. And while that's terrible, you now have found cancer when your survivability is much higher than it would have been had you waited. So, in my case, had my tumor been 1 millimeter deeper into my colon wall, my chances of survival would have dropped 10 points.
Wow.
So for me, great news that I got it done. And so even the bad news is good news.
So you just, brought like a level of storytelling and explanation to that. I wonder if you could also talk about sort of the role that humor plays, because I know that's something that through your sort of messaging and what you've done, you've brought that in. So can you kind of explore that for us?
Yeah. Every comedian, how often do you hear about colonoscopies by comedians? It's like, it is very funny. Getting poked in the butt, that is like classically funny. And like your kids, when they're like 6 or 7 or 8, they think it's funny. And it's still funny when you're an adult. So how do we build on that energy? Like it kind of calcifies into fear for a lot of people. How do we go back to when it's really funny? Like anything that has to do with your butt is actually funny. We just have to tap back into that in a way that's like persuasive and positive. I think it's a great marketing opportunity. It's a great communication because like you look at mammograms. Are mammograms funny? No. How could that be funny? It's not funny. It's just like your boobs getting squished. That's not really funny, but a colonoscopy is funny. So I think, and then it's also related to your butt, and anything but humor is great. So it's just, I think that's one reason that I am so involved with this is because I get to make butt jokes all the time with people. And you just laughed just now. It's really funny to be able to do this work and I'm loving it.
Well, and it sounds like, you want folks to not avoid this topic, but to know about the topic, to be comfortable with the topic, to make it
That's
more
right.
socially acceptable, to make it in the mainstream so that it becomes a natural thing and the rates of getting colonoscopies keep going up.
That's
And
right.
so, obviously just making it part of the conversation, going into humor, like you said, kind of some of the childlike humor that we lose, we can kind of harken back to. I mean, that completely makes sense. And obviously we've seen the results of this being destigmatized as the rates of people
Right.
getting
We,
colonoscopies
we
continues
just
to
need to
go
use
up.
humor to make it kind of say like this is something we should be doing versus humor saying, oh my God, I got this colonoscopy is the worst thing ever
Yeah,
and so invasive and sort of like just all of the kind of old school humor that is more typical. How do we actually make it funny to
yeah,
get one rather than to avoid one?
yeah. And I like the best nap of your life and the day off angle. So I want to ask kind of a different question here around health communication. Um, you have to be very precise. Sometimes that's the result of regulation. And, as I think through some of the topics that we're discussing today, I think about some of the other people in the patient advocacy world that we've interviewed on Chief Influencer. We've interviewed the head of the Leukemia Lymphoma Society and the Arthritis Foundation. And I'm just thinking about the point of view someone who's running an organization that has to deal with those regulations might think about this. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you manage and how through the lead from behind effort you have managed using language that's very precise and accurate, but that might kind of get in the way of telling the story that you want to tell, overly complicates things. Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yes, it's a constant battle. And it is on my mind all the time that and coming from the world of data in the for-profit space, how you use data, it's like having data is like a little flame of power. You can use that power for good, you can use it for bad, but it's data is power. And so having solid data can make your case in a much stronger way. You can also overuse data so that you lose the story. You can use data improperly to make a story that really doesn't exist. And so you have to start with kind of ethics underneath your data. You have to know what is true, and then you have to use the story to kind of get to that truth, and use data to get to that truth. But then also you don't want to use the right data that with having some precision, but then you don't add so many asterisks to it that now you've lost. I mean, takes a lot of skill, and you also have to take some risks. It's easy to say like, well, this is a solution versus the solution. You know what I mean? Or this, rather than it will prevent colon cancer, it can help prevent colon cancer. Like you can soften the edges, but you have to still be willing to take some risks in the data that you're saying where it there maybe are a couple asterisks that you are kind of that you can't put in the headline, and kind of put in the sub headline, put it in just so you put it in the source, but as long as it points to kind of the truth, that I think it's worth doing. I think I'm in a unique place that I'm not, because I'm not a doctor, that I can take more risks, without kind of losing my license, than doctors can. I think there's so many regulations kind of if you're in the industry, but I think that I also need to be, and people who work with me, we still need to use data that is either fully correct or really directionally correct, that fits into
Mhm.
like the larger narrative, which is true.
Let's talk about, because I think for some people, they might think, okay, well, if I have this type of cancer, I have it. How can a test prevent cancer? And you've just explained this to me before. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the reason is that, and we can talk a little bit of data. So, and why this is difficult onto your previous point. So, it might get a little bit technical. That basically somewhere between 27 and 40% of people in their mid 40s have a polyp. So I say 1 in 3, roughly. 1 in 3 people-ish has a polyp by their mid-40s. And a polyp is like it's like a slow growing like mole of sorts. It's a bump in your colon. And about half of them are precancerous. The other half are not. But basically a precancerous polyp is some of them turn into cancer. Not all of them, but some of them do. If you have a precancerous polyp in your gut, you don't want it in there because it grows with no symptoms. It could grow quickly, it could grow slowly. We don't know. We don't want it in your colon because if you have one, you have a chance of getting colon cancer. Now, if you don't have a polyp, you really can't get colon cancer until you grow a new polyp. Of course, so colonoscopies go in, they look for polyps, they visually see them with a camera, and then in the scope that is in your colon, like if they find a polyp, they actually send little scissors of sorts through the scope and snip out your polyp on the spot and suck it through the tube out of your body. It's a really cool procedure where they're not just finding the problem, the polyp, they actually remove it on the spot. And it has no pain, it has no consequences. Like you don't even know this has happened. Your polyp didn't hurt before, it doesn't hurt now. But now you basically will wake up, hopefully, polyp free. Of course, so if they have found, so basically that's how colonoscopies prevent colon cancer, by removing precancerous polyps. The reason it's important that polyps are really common, like roughly 1 in 3 people by their mid-40s, closer 1 in 2 people by their 50s have a precancerous polyp that needs to be removed. And if you leave it in there, it might turn into cancer. It might not, but you want to find out if you have polyps.
Yeah, and I think, it is a little technical, but I think that's such an important thing for people to know because if they think, oh, this is just a test to tell me if I have cancer, oh my gosh, I don't even want to know. But you're saying, no, you may not have cancer yet. You may have a precancerous polyp.
Yeah.
And by going in and removing that, that is going to prevent you from getting cancer because that won't turn into cancer. And so looking at a test as a type of prevention, a lot of times people think of a test as positive or negative, but in this case, this is a test and
it's a procedure. It's not even a test.
Yeah.
It's a procedure. It's actually going in and it's like, yeah, it's a procedure. It's like almost like a miniature surgery of sorts, where they're not cutting you up, but like they're going in physically looking in your body for something and will remove it on the spot if they find it. I mean, it's a really cool screening that is fundamentally different than the stool tests that just, look for there are actual tests just looking for whether or not you have blood in your stool or not, or a mammogram, which is looking for a spot in your breast, but doesn't do anything about it on the spot. Most of them really are just looking and not doing anything about it. Whereas a colonoscopy looks, finds, and then solves the problem on the spot.
So Brooks, if somebody's listening right now and they're about to turn 45, or maybe they're older than 45, but they haven't had a colonoscopy yet, what's your message to them?
If you are 45 or over, your colon and you have private insurance, it should be covered. It should be essentially a free test. You do need to just double check because insurance companies can be a little, sneaky sometimes. Make sure that it's getting coded properly, but it should be fully covered once you're 45. There tend to be wait lists these days, but you should go because you want to get it kind of as soon as possible, but it might take a few months before you can actually get it done. So that's why you should call your doctor pretty much right away to get your colonoscopy scheduled, because you might still have to wait 6 months or even 9 months before you can get it. But getting it sooner rather than later is really important because a lot of cancer happens in that time between 45 and 55. If you're not 45 yet, you may still be able to get an early colonoscopy. If you have symptoms like blood in your stool, you should, a blood in your stool is that's what I had. 2 doctors told me that I didn't need to get a colonoscopy. They thought I had hemorrhoids. That's sort of like the big false flag with blood in your stool is hemorrhoids. So you might have hemorrhoids, but you could also have colon cancer. And if you have blood in your stool, you should be qualified to get a colonoscopy. You just have to kind of push a little bit harder and convince your doctor that you really want a colonoscopy rather than just writing it off as hemorrhoids. So look for blood in your stool. You got it. That's your ticket to a colonoscopy. The second is having a conversation with your family, your parents, your siblings about whether or not they have ever had cancer earlier in their life, colon cancer, and or even large polyps. If your parents had colon cancer, then you should be able to get a colonoscopy 10 years earlier than when they were diagnosed. So if they were diagnosed at 50, then you should be able to get a colonoscopy at 40. But if they also had a large polyp that was over a centimeter at 50, that also counts as if they had colon cancer. So you just have conversations about your family history. And if you do have some kind of family history, you should be able to convince your doctor to let you get an earlier one.
Yeah, and I think it's so important what you're sharing because, in my case, as I said earlier, I had an early stage of a different type of cancer, and I was able to get that removed. But it was only then, as an adult in my 40s, that I found out from my mom that I had a grandparent who had colon cancer. And somehow this had eluded me my whole life. I thought that grandparent died of a different type of cancer. And so I was able to get a colonoscopy before 45 and insurance covered it. So having those conversations with your family is so important. And like in your case, and you wrote a wonderful essay for the Today Show that's on their website, and you talked about, your symptoms and talking about that with your husband, and this is like an awkward thing, and you went to the doctor and you had to kind of keep pushing. But I think, those communications, those conversations are just so important in this case, and you're just such a great exemplar for that, to remind everybody that that's okay, and I know that as people talk to you and they hear your story, they're really inspired that, they can take those steps. And you've continued to take steps. Can you tell us about your new venture, Worldclass?
Yes. So I'm starting a new company. It should be launching this fall, maybe September, October. I'm working with two other female colon cancer survivors. And Worldclass is a clothing brand that really speaks to the stigma of colon cancer. It's kind of yet another kind of way to address stigma. And when you think about it, um, kind of fashion is kind of a classic way of self-expression and kind of dealing with stigma. And so we decided to start a fashion brand that and just basically build a brand. It's called Worldclass. It's short for World Class Ass. And we're trying to make it, first of all, a really cool brand, a cool logo, high quality materials, of something that people would want to wear independent of whether or not they care about this cause. Just they want to wear it because it's cool. And then and hopefully lead to conversations around colonoscopies, showing that colonoscopies can be sexy, and that they're not intimidating and they're really great for your health. So we want Worldclass to be kind of part of the whole wellness, gut health trend that's happening right now, and show that colonoscopies are not so medical. They're just a really important thing to do kind of as you're kind of getting into your 40s. And we
And
can go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. I was going to ask about the proceeds.
Oh, yes. All of the proceeds that we make from this brand will go towards a nonprofit that pays for colonoscopies for underinsured folks. A lot of people in rural counties do not have access to colonoscopies. They may not have a gastroenterologist in their entire county, and they may need transportation. They may need help paying for the prep. They just may need someone to walk them through how to get it done. And so we are focusing on those communities because screening rates are low. There's a lot of cancer burden. And so we want basically every sale of a world-class item to go towards directly paying for these procedures.
That's awesome. It's really great that you're turning your business acumen and your passion into something new
Yeah.
to continue to make an impact on people. Tell us, for folks who want to follow Worldclass or they want to follow you, Brooks, where should they go?
They can go on Instagram. It's worldclass_clothing. And if they want to go to the website, get on our list for when we launch, it's worldclassclothing.com. You can actually go to shop.worldclassclothing.com right now. to get access to the pre-launch kind of collection, and but keep an eye out for when we launch later this year.
There's some great socks.
Yes, we've got socks. We got an ass hat. So it's a hat that says ass on it and a really quite cute kind of logo. That's already been selling quite well. And then there's an ass hoodie for this fall. And then we have some world-class sweatshirts that are sort of our signature item that I've already been wearing in the airport. I mean, getting a lot of positive response. And then also we actually have a colonoscopy enthusiast t-shirt and a tote. So if you want to be loud and proud with your advocacy for colonoscopies, you can go all the way and wear a colonoscopy enthusiast tee.
That is great. And I know that as we continue to follow you over the years, you will probably have other entrepreneurial endeavors. So if somebody just wants to follow you, Brooks, where should they go?
It's Brooks Bell on Instagram. Instagram is my main kind of platform.
Great.
You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. I do a lot of content on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, Brooks, I am so grateful that you took time to be with us and share your story. A lot of people go through personal challenges, but very few of them say, I'm going to use that to do something about it. And then hardly anybody actually achieves a big goal that they set out to, and as quickly as you did, getting a major celebrity on board to change hearts and minds and make an impact. And obviously seeing that data from ZocDocs about the number of people who have taken action toward getting a colonoscopy after Ryan Reynolds did it publicly at age 45. I just think it's a really inspiring story. And for those in the patient advocacy space and the healthcare space, I think the lesson of the core brand and sort of who that's meant for, and when it does make sense to create another brand, campaign brand, or a sub brand like you did with Lead From Behind, that's something that many of us, no matter what field we're in, could really look at what you've done and use that for inspiration and to inform our own efforts. So it's great to spend time with you. And I just want to say congratulations on being recognized as a chief influencer, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thanks so much, Anthony. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Chief Influencer, a production of Social Driver and the Communications Board. If you know a leader who should be featured as a chief influencer, please nominate them at chiefinfluencer.org. For show notes and more, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn. Until next time,